Initiation into Hermetics, a Practice of Magic by Franz Barden. Magic loading of talismans, amulets, and gems. The belief in talismans, amulets, and jewels goes back to times immemorial and has its origin in fetishism, which is still widespread amongst primitive races. The belief in a talisman and similar things has survived from those earlier stages to the present day, but modified its character according to the modern style of life. What else but talismans are all the mascots, pendants, rings, and brooches which are supposed to bring good luck? It is the birthstones that are held in particular high esteem today. So, if there were not something true or perhaps even magic in the nature of talismans, the thought of and the belief in them would be bound to have disappeared long ago. Let us then sort out the chaff from the wheat and lift the veil a bit. Lift the veil a bit. The talisman, an amulet, or any birthstone is meant to strengthen the trustworthiness and the credit extended to the person who bears it. By paying closer attention to his talisman, the bearer's subconsciousness is, by way of auto-suggestion, influenced in the desired direction, and according to his aptitudes, various effects may be carried out. No wonder if a materially inclined man, an uninterested scientist, condemns such a belief, expresses criticism and pokes fun, marking it with the brand of superstition. The wise magician is aware of the true nature of such things, and he will not be content of bearing a talisman for the mere purpose of raising the faith and the confidence, but he will endeavour to investigate the laws underlying the secrets of the talismans. He knows that talismans based on the belief of the bearers become inefficient as soon as they pass into the hand of an unbeliever or a skeptic. With his knowledge of the causal nexus, the magician goes deeper and deeper into the matter relating to it. Before dealing with this synthesis, let us treat the various differences. A talisman in the hands of a magician is nothing else but an implement, a clue, something material into which he is binding or enclosing his power. His ultimate cause, his fluid. Its shape, whether being a ring, a pendant, or a brooch, and its material value are of no importance to him at all. He neither considers beauty nor fashion or prestige. It represents to him an object, with the help of which, by binding his power to it, he produces certain causes destined to liberate the desired effect, irrespective of the bearer believing it or not. A pentacle, on the other hand, is a specific object, a talisman being in accordance with the laws of analogy concerning the desired effect, strength, faculty, and cause. The magician has to consider these rules of analogy when he is producing and loading such a pentacle, which he will always prefer to the talisman, especially if he wants to communicate with beings of other higher worlds, no matter whether good or evil entities are concerned, genii or demons. An amulet, again, is a divine name or a holy verse from the Bible, a mantram, that is, a sentence expressing the worship of a deity, written on parchment or an ordinary parchment paper, carrying around various magic herbs such as mandragora and the like, which are believed to possess a kind of protective power, belongs to this category of amulets too. Furthermore, this category includes fluid condensers in solid or liquid form, or blotting papers moistened with them, lodestones and natural magnets, as well as tiny artificial horseshoe magnets. Last of all, let me mention the precious and semi-precious stones, which are particularly suitable fluid condensers and have been used at all times for protection, luck, success, and healing. Astrologers have ascribed a special effect to each stone on the base of the colour and the hardness theory, and advise people born under a certain sign or planet to bear the respective stone as a lucky stone. But the true magician knows, of course, that these astrologically selected stones have a very insignificant effect, and that such a stone is absolutely worthless for anyone that does not believe in such things, whereas stones which are in accordance with an astrological effect are suitable to and susceptible of the corresponding magic loading as far as hardness, chemical composition, and colour are concerned. The magician can, as far as possible, consider these astrological arguments, but he is by no means dependent on them. He can, if he wishes to, load any stone, even the one which seems to be most unfavourable from the astrological point of view, magically to such a degree that certain results can be accomplished, no matter whether the person does or not believe. Turn the page. Does or not believe in the result. There will always be the outcome the magician orders and nothing else. Having interpreted the different kinds and variants of talismans, amulets, pentacles, and precious stones, let me talk about several loadings, of which I am going to quote 10 kinds. 1. Loading with the mere willpower in connection with imagination. 2. Loading with the help of timed accumulation of the vital power and the wish impregnation. Loading by binding elementals, elementaries, beings due to accomplish the desired result. Loading with the help of individual or traditional rituals. Did I give the... I can't remember if I gave the... Yeah. 2. Loading with the help of timed accumulation of the vital power and the wish impregnation. 3. Loading by binding elementals, elementaries, beings due to accomplish the desired result. 4. Loading with the help of individual or traditional rituals. 5. Loading with the help of magic formulas, mantrams, tantras, and such like. 6. Loadings by accumulation of elements. 7. Loading by electric and magnetic fluids. 8. Loading with the help of accumulation of the power of the light. 9. Loading by electromagnetic balls, volts. 10. Loading by magosexual operation. Each of the loading possibilities quoted here has numerous variants again, but it would take me too long to describe all of them. The advanced magician will find his own loadings with the help of his intuition. The 10 ones mentioned here are supposed to serve as a rule of conduct only, and therefore a brief description appears indicated. What's that? 2-1? I can't make out the text. I don't know, something missing, or 2-1. Loading with the mere will in connection with the imagination. Yeah, that's number 1 repeated again. 2, number 1. Loading with the mere will in connection with the imagination. This is the simplest and easiest method, the effect of which depends on the willpower and the imaginative faculty of the magician. Every talisman, every amulet, every particle, with the exception of paper and parchment amulets, has to be cleared from the fluid clinging to it before the magic loading can be performed. The best way to do so is with the help of the magic of water. Take a glass of fresh cold water and dip the talisman into it. While doing so, concentrate on the water, taking away all evil influences. Hold on to this concentration for quite a while. After some minutes of deep concentration, you ought to be perfectly sure that all evil influences have been sucked up by the water, and that your talisman is absolutely free from them. Dry the talisman and now be quite sure that it is receptive of your own influence. You have to perform this clearage on every non-liquid talisman, irrespective of the method you are about to use in order to load it. Hold the talisman in your hand and, by imagination, fix your desire on it with all your willpower, with faith and confidence. Time the efficiency of your desire, whether it is to last for a certain period only or forever. Furthermore, if the effect is meant for a certain person only or for anybody that is supposed to carry the talisman, use the form of the present tense. That means imagine that the desired result is working already. You can intensify the virtue of the concentrated desire by frequent repetition of the loading, which will make the emissive power of the talisman more pervasive. Transfer the feeling while concentrating on the wish that the effectiveness of the talisman should remain and become stronger, if you do not think about it, and that, in case it is meant for somebody else, it should do the same effect. Provided you did load the talisman to the best of your knowledge and with the greatest possible force, it is ready for use. 2. Loading with timed accumulation of vital power and wish impregnation. The talisman is to be freed from the fluid in the same manner as described in 1. If the point in question is a talisman which you want to use yourself, you will have to perform the accumulation of the vital power in your own body. In brackets, see the instruction of step 3. If you loaded your body expansively with vital power, lead it via your right hand into your talisman and compress the accumulated vital power to such a degree that it does fill the entire shape of the talisman, the amulet or the stone. While doing so, you have to imagine that the talisman is sucking in the vital power, keeping it inside for so long as you want it to. You must work with the firm conviction that, during the time you are carrying or using the talisman, its effectiveness will not decrease but become stronger instead. The vital power taken over by the talisman and pressed together there to a snow-white brilliancy seems to be very much like a shining sun. You see how far your imagination must reach. Transfer the desire concerning the effectiveness of the talisman to your body right away while accumulating the vital power. The duration of the effect can be fixed imaginatively afterwards too. Choose the present tense to express your inner conviction that the talisman has got its full effectiveness immediately after the loading. Do not command several wishes to one talisman and, least of all, contrary ones. The most effective loading is restricted to one single desire only. Furthermore, always express wishes within the reach of possibility and avoid fancy loadings which cannot be fulfilled. This command goes for every kind of talismans and loadings. How expansive the force of such a loading is can best be checked up with the help of a sidereal pendulum. If you load a talisman for someone else, the accumulated vital force is to be led not through the own body, but has to be taken from the universe directly, being imaginatively condensed and conveyed to the talisman. All the rest of the instructions remain the same. Drink and then I guess 2-3. Indeed. 2-3. Loading by binding elementals, elementaries, and beings supposed to release the desired effect. I have already described the creation of elementals and elementaries in the previous steps. Naturally, any being like these can be bound to a talisman, a pentacle, an amulet, or a stone. The spell has to be performed with a self-selected word or short, specially composed ritual or a gesture with the help of the imagination. It will suffice then to execute the gesture or the ritual or to pronounce the word or the formula, and the spellbound elemental will release the respective effect. The magician will certainly know the times when he will be able to bind a being to a talisman. It is obvious that he will use elementals to influence the mental sphere. But for the achievement of astral or material results, he will resort to elementaries. Equally, entities or beings can be bound to a talisman in this manner too, in order to obtain certain effects. And there is no magician who, duly trained, could not perform such acts. He is able to establish the contact by the practice of the passive communication with the help of the magic mirror or by inducing a trance in the akasha. No further directions are necessary here, and the magician ought to know himself what he has got to do. 2-4. Loading by individual or traditional rituals. This practice is preferred mainly by Oriental magicians who are endowed with a stupendous amount of patience, which is indispensable as far as this kind of loading is concerned. The Oriental magician makes a certain self-selected sign above the talisman, or he makes this sign with it directly in the air, with his hand, his fingers, or even with one finger quite individually. While doing so, he concentrates on the effect which the talisman is desired to have. He will repeat this experiment several times every day, thus producing so strong a battery, the volt, in the akasha by these constant repetitions that the desired effect is as good as granted. If by frequent repetition of the experiment the magic volt in the akasha has grown strong enough, it suffices to perform the ritual or the sign with or above the talisman, which may even be done without imagination or without any mental effort, in order to produce the desired effect. A magician familiar with the Kabbalah will naturally know that he did load his own battery in the akasha ritually 462 times, corresponding to the Kabbalistic number of 462 on 462 days, for the purpose that his ritual should produce an automatic effect. This loading is practicable without great effort, but it is very wearisome and lengthy, and a European magician will hardly display this surplus of patience in order to achieve a result which he can sooner obtain with the help of one of the methods described here. The loading by a traditional ritual is easier and requires a few repetitions only to bring about the contact, the effect being so amazing as to verge on a miracle. The snag here is that such traditional loading rituals happen to be the secrets of lodges, societies, sects, and monasteries, which I myself cannot give away. It is quite obvious that a magician well trained in clairvoyance could easily get hold of these secrets, but there is always the danger of being found out. And the Oriental magicians who guard their rituals under the oath of death would proceed ruthlessly against anyone that should dare to grab them without permission. Therefore, I warn every magician not to do such pilferings. pilferings. It is usually by gestures that the secret signs of various deities, Ishtar, Devatas, are performed upon the talisman. In a similar way as I detailed it in the description of the individual rites. No doubt that a loading like this has an extraordinarily strong effect because this particular ritual is celebrated by hundreds of magicians, thus being handed down traditionally from one generation to the other. A member who has been declared to be mature is usually offered such a ritual as a sort of distinction. The grant of such a ritual, which at the same time establishes the contact with the corresponding battery, is called the Orient Anchor or Abhisheka. Abhisheka. I'm sure there's a better way to say that. Doesn't matter right now. Abhisheka, that's it. Something like that. 2.5. Loading by magic formulas, mantrams, tantras, etc. This kind represents one of the greatest and most powerful loadings, but it requires high knowledge and a lot of preparations, which I will describe in my following 2 works, concerning the magic evocation and the practical Kabbalah. Therefore here I shall restrict myself to a short remark only. The first kind of loading is realized by repeating a magic formula, and the desired effect is accomplished with the help of an entity selected for this purpose. The loading by mantrams is done by imagining or speaking a sacred sentence in sign of worship of a deity many times into a suitable talisman, japa yoga. The quality of the deity in question becomes materialized in this manner. It is absolutely certain that fabulous results can be compassed on all planes in this manner. A loading by tantras is nothing else but the correct use of word magic, where certain cosmic powers are employed with the help of suitable letters, words, etc. regarding the cosmic rhythm, sound, color, quality. To 6, loading by accumulation of elements. This possibility of loading is offered to every magician who went through his practical training up to now. Supposing the magician wants a certain result to be achieved through an element principle, he will load the talisman or the pentacle he chose with the corresponding element. The loading itself happens in the same way as described in point 2, by accumulation of the vital power, only excepting that the desired element is used instead of the vital power. For a personal use, the accumulation of elements takes place in the own body. But for other persons, it is done directly from the universe. If, for example, one element happens to be difficult to be mastered, the opposite one is to be used for screening with the help of a loaded talisman. Many other results can be accomplished through the elements, and a magician who is absolutely perfect in mastering the elements will intuitively compose the desired variants himself. That's what it says. 2.7. Loading with the help of the electric or the magnetic fluid. One of the most powerful loadings consists in using the electric or the magnetic fluid. When the talisman is supposed to protect something, to screen it, to irradiate, or to develop any kind of activity, one will mainly use the electric fluid, but if it is to produce an attractive power, to bring about sympathy, luck, or success, the magnetic fluid will be employed. The manner of loading is exactly the same as previously described. But if the point is a talisman for personal purposes, the accumulation is performed in the corresponding half of the body only. That means not in the whole body. The magnetic fluid is accumulated dynamically in the left half of the body and projected through the left hand into the talisman. In the matter of the electric fluid, it will be the right side, and the projection to the talisman takes place via the right hand. 2.8. Loading through accumulation of light power. To achieve subtler spiritual effects such as the enhancement of different occult powers, intuition, inspiration, etc., a talisman is loaded with condensed light power. The loading is executed in the same time as the accumulation of vital force with concomitant desire, impregnation, timing, and so forth. The light pressed together in the talisman is like a sun which shines brighter than the ordinary sunlight. A talisman designed for personal use is accumulated with light power through the own body, whereas the power is to be drawn from the universe when intended for other persons. Otherwise, the usual rules and instructions as given before have to be observed. Wet my whistle. To 9, loading with an electromagnetic ball. Volt. To mitigate karmic influences, to be protected against influences of other spheres, and to turn fate according to one's desire, a talisman is loaded for one's own or for other people's purposes with a magic volt. This kind of loading is called vaulting and represents the strictest imitation of the Akasha principle. And only a magician aiming at the highest target, the union with God, should use this kind of loading, not to burden himself with an interference in the Akasha. As I did repeatedly mention already, everything existing has been created by the two fluids by means of the four elements. According to the universal law, the electric fluid will always be in the center. On the periphery of the electric fluid, where expansion ceases, the magnetic fluid begins to work, and this is where it is most powerless. The distance from the focus or center to the periphery of the electric fluid is exactly the same as the one from the beginning of the magnetic fluid to the end of the periphery where the magnetic attractive power is strongest. This law is valid in small things as well as in the big ones. Consequently, in the microcosm as well as in the macrocosm. When loading with a volt, i.e. when vaulting, attention has to be paid to this law. If you wish to load a talisman, a pentacle, or a stone for your own purposes with a volt, you have to proceed as follows. In the right half of your body, accumulate the electric fluid dynamically, with all your strength via the hand and finally through the forefinger. Project the accumulated electric fluid to a powerful electric spark and encase it with your imagination exactly in the center of your talisman. You have got to see this electric spark as if it were absolutely red hot. Now do the same with the magnetic fluid, directing it through your forefinger of the left hand, and from there in front of you, so that you wrap the ball-shaped electric spark with the magnetic fluid to such a degree that it becomes invisible in your imagination. Imagine and compress magnetic fluid as being of a blue colour. Did you manage this, only a small blue ball ought to be left, comprising the entire shape of the talisman. Herewith the volt has been produced, and as soon as the electric fluid is irradiating inside this volt and the magnetic one outside of it, impregnate the ball, that means the ready volt, with your desire and fix the duration of the effect. Supposing you wish to increase the loading later, which probably will not be necessary, all you have to do is to condense the magnetic fluid, the electric fluid which happens to be inside of it being increased automatically. A volt like this has such a powerful magic effect that it could at will even change the karma. A magician who can accomplish this is no longer subject to the customary karma, but only to the divine providence. Loading a talisman for another person with a volt, it has to be done in the same manner. But the electric and magnetic fluids are not drawn from the own body, but directly from the universe. Vaulting for other people should be practiced only at the worst in positive case of necessity, because the magician has to be absolutely sure that the person in question is really inspired with high ideals, longing for ideals only, but being haunted by karma, or, to express it in a popular way, being an ill-starred fellow whose run of bad luck continues. The magician's clairvoyant eyes will realize these facts, and his intuition will always teach him what to do and what to avoid. At this point, the magician himself will be responsible for all and everything. The most skeptic Thomas, however, would be greatly amazed at the enormous effect of such a magical vault, bound to a small horseshoe magnet so that the ball is wrapping in the whole magnet. 210. Loading by a mago-sexual operation. There is still another kind of loading, a subject I shall only deal briefly with here, for ethic and moral reasons. I desist from describing the practice in detail. The meditating magician will find out all about this practice, but he too will desist from working with it, since in the meantime he got to know so many different possibilities of loading. Only a magician on a very high ethical level could dare to make use of this practice, because lastly, all things are pure to the pure ones. In the hands of an immoral man, these practices would do more harm than good. At least a lot of mischief would be done with them, and powers as high as those of love must not be misused. Therefore, I am restricted to comment briefly on the principle on which this loading possibility is based. First of all, certain preparations are essential, without which the operation could not successfully be accomplished. Any mago-sexual operation, whatever purpose it may serve, is a sacred act, a prayer by which the generative act of love is imitated. Everything created in the universe has been produced by the act of love. This universal law is the fundament of sexual magic. Obviously, one ought to work with a like-minded, congenial partner who has gone through the same magical training. The male, that is, the magician, represents the active, the begetting principle, whereas the female magician is the passive, the parturient principle. The female partner, familiar with the mastery of the electric and magnetic fluids, has got to change her polarity, so that her head becomes magnetic and her genitals electric. With respect to the male partner, the conditions are reversed. The polarity of his head must be magnetic and that of his genitals electric. The intercourse between the two partners produces an exceedingly strong bipolar effort which gives rise to an enormous effect. Performing this act of love, its outcome does not mean new life, but the desired cause together with its effect has been begotten. Here the lower as well as the upper double pole are coming into operation. The four-pole magnet, the Yod-He-Vah-He, is working the highest mystery of love here, the creation. How easy it would be to degrade this creative act, the highest thing existent on this earth, to mere carnal appetites which would lead to damnation. The expulsion of Adam and Eve from the paradise finds its highest symbolism here. The magician who dares to approach the highest of all practices has to master the upper as well as the lower streams in order to transfer the loading eventually into his talismans. To dishonor this sacred act by carnal desires would mean to repeat the fate of Adam and Eve, who are no longer allowed to enjoy the fruits of the paradise. The intuitive magician will understand without difficulties how great this symbolism is, and will agree with me if I stick to my duty of secrecy about the greatest of all mysteries. Okay. Realization of a desire with the help of electromagnetic balls in the Akasha, the so-called vaulting. I have described the production of a vault by means of the electromagnetic fluid in the chapter referring to loading a talisman. The process is the same here, excepting that the electromagnetic ball has to be bigger for a vault in the Akasha. The practice is as follows. Accumulate the electric fluid in your right half of the body with all the strength you can afford, and project it through the palm of your right hand to the outside, forming the electric fluid, at the same time with your imagination into a ball suspended in the air. This projection is therefore not going through the fingers, but directly through the inner part of the right hand. The fiery ball, which has to be turned out, red hot by the compressed electric fluid, is becoming increased dynamically by frequent accumulation of the electric fluid in itself and by a reiterated projection, and enlarged by the repeated loading. This kind of accumulation and dynamical loading has to be performed until the ball has reached a diameter of 1 yard in brackets 1 meter. Perform the same process with the magnetic fluid, beginning to project the accumulated magnetic fluid through the palm of the left hand to the outside by wrapping the electric ball in your magnetic fluid one layer after the other. By frequent repetition of this accumulation of the magnetic fluid and its projection, the wrapping is growing until the diameter of the whole ball has reached 2 yards in brackets 2 meters. That's odd. The electromagnetic vault is now completed. When doing such a vault destined for another person, the magician has to take the electric as well as the magnetic fluid directly from the universe. If such an electromagnetic vault has been prepared with a firm faith and conviction, the magician will impregnate this vault the strongest magic accumulator existing with the respective concentration of the desire. By means of his imagination, he will create the desired cause which his vault is to produce. At last, having determined the duration of his magic vault, the magician will, as it were, ecstatically fling it into the macrocosm, the causal world, consequently into the akasha by the way of his imagination. Imaginatively, he interrupts the connection with his vault, stopping thinking of it the very moment he flings it, forgetting it purposefully and paying his attention to other different things. The vaulting quoted here is one of the most powerful operations which the magician is capable to accomplish in his present stage of development, for now he has succeeded in mastering himself as well as other people. The cause he did transfer with his vault into the akasha will do its effect, and it is of no importance at all whether it concerns the mental, the astral, or the material plane. The magician will certainly appreciate this great and responsible opportunity and accomplish noble deeds only for his own benefit and that of his fellow creatures for whom he did dare to undertake this operation. The magician who walked on the path of hardships up to this very point has balanced his karma with his troublesome exercises, which were more than asceticism so far that it will do him no more harm. The magician is no longer subject to the ordinary influences of destiny. He became master of his fate, and nothing but divine providence in its highest aspect can influence his will. Summary of all exercises, step 9. 1. Magic mental training. Practice of clairvoyance with the help of magic mirrors. A. Seeing through time and space. B. Distant effects through the magic mirror. C. Different tasks of projection through the magic mirror. 2. Magic psychic training. Deliberate separation of the astral body from the material body. 2. Impregnation of the astral body with the 4 divine fundamental qualities. 3. Magic physical training. 1. Treatment of the sick with the electromagnetic fluid. 2. Magical loading of talismans, amulets and gems. 3. Wish realization through electromagnetic balls in the akasha, the so-called vaulting. End of the 9th step. Mr. Barden's initiation into Hermetics.